Hi, well, today's guest is Mark Borthwick. He is currently New Zealand Cricket Regional Coach Development Manager. He's also spent time in the women's game with the Wellington Blaze and assisting with the White Ferns. He's been head coach of a couple of senior men's sides and spent a fair amount of time coaching out at Hutt International Boys School, and I believe started out at Wellington College, where you're also a teacher before kind of moving into the coaching space. So really excited to talk to Mark today and kind of get his insights and have a good discussion about some areas in cricket. So where I really like to start, Mark, is, well, first of all, welcome to the podcast, welcome to the show. Great to have you here, and appreciate your time. I like to start off with my guests, just a little bit kind of a background, where I guess cricket started for you, and maybe just sort of work through briefly where you got to the point you are now.
Sure. Well, cricket started for me in South Africa. I grew up in South Africa, and my first exposure to the game was at a little primary school in Johannesburg called King Edward the 7th Primary School. And I always recall one day, my mum always very fondly tells the story of the time when they couldn't find me. I was gone. They couldn't find me. They called the cops, and the whole of the police were out looking for me. And I was at the cricket ground at Kepps, which was at that stage probably about 5 kilometres away from our house. I'd walked up to the cricket ground because on the Friday before, the physical education master, a guy by the name of John Ridgway, had said, there's cricket being played here on Saturday, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I'd walked up to the school, and every time there was a fall of wicket or the overs changed, I ran onto the field to ask if I could play. John got very frustrated with me because it was a selected team. It was called the Tohorse team, which was the junior team in those days at Kepps. Ended up going into the tuck shop and using the payphone to ring my mother to come and pick me up from the school. So that was my first exposure to the game. And a couple of weeks later, I was playing in that team. So it was a pretty interesting introduction. We played on matte surfaces, and it was that was really the start of my cricket journey. I had a younger brother too, and we'd play all the time in the back garden. That was like, there was a pitch mode, there was an area cut out that fruit trees, etc. You could only hit the ball to certain areas of the ground. Couldn't hit it over the tennis courts next door because that was out. There was a big dog there, so you didn't hit the ball over there because you didn't get it back. So that was a bit about my background in terms of how things started up for me in terms of, and I was absolutely engrossed and captured by the game as a young fella. I lived and breathed the game.
Yeah, awesome. So where did your first opportunity come up from a coaching side of things?
Then too, what sort of happened around the neighbourhood is we had friends who used to come around to our place, and my brother'd pick a team, I'd pick a team, and we'd play against each other in the back garden. And I guess that's where I started talking to other people who were playing in my team about how they went about playing the game. And I guess that's when things kicked off for me around not so much the coaching side of things, but it was more the playing. But I also had I had a great couple of mentors as a young fella. I had two school teachers, John Ridgway, who was a really important influence in my life, and interestingly had a lot to do with Grant Elliott as well, who's a New Zealand cricketer. And another teacher at that stage was a fellow by the name of John Lees, who was just a good man, just a great man, and was very strong on the values. In our household was, strong valued household. My dad was churchgoer, so there was a strong set of values. Growing up under a strong set of values in our house. So I think that all those things kind of influenced my growth and particularly around the teaching side of things. I probably thought then when I was being taught by John Lees, I'd like to be like that guy, So he had a big impact on me in terms of possibly career choice.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So did you studied for teaching in South Africa?
Yeah. I went through the Johannesburg Teachers Training College of Wits University. It was affiliated to Wits University, but kind of all the way through school, I sort of got involved in helping out with coaching or playing cricket, and then in terms of teaching. And one of the things I did while I was Obviously, I grew up in the apartheid era in South Africa, so there was no international cricket, no international television. We weren't exposed to any of that. I played club cricket at my old boys' club, which was called Old Edwardians, which was down the hill in Houghton. And I played schoolboy cricket basically on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and club cricket on Sundays. So I was literally playing 5 days a week. It was fantastic. It was great. It was really wonderful in those days. Probably not the best thing, because I got a bit tired of it after a while, but I needed to learn how to pull back a little bit. So I think it's important to get balance. And then my working life, once I'd got to university, I was exposed to Dr. Ali Bacha, who was in charge of the cricket development program in South Africa. And he offered me and a couple of mates an opportunity to go out into Soweto and coach cricket there. And that was pretty humbling. I learned a lot about poverty, and learned a lot about myself and how lucky I was in comparison to half the 3/4 of the population at that stage in my country. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's there's a couple of big things there. Like we've spoken a fair bit about cricket over the years and that sort of thing, but a couple of things, like even talking about the apartheid era, like probably could connect those dots, but not something I'd really sort of thought. What, again, it's not cricket related, but what's I guess what's stuck with you, I guess, growing up? What's the...
Yeah, interestingly, very little, to be honest. I was lucky. I kind of grew up in an environment where it didn't affect me at all. It probably affected me more once I'd started my tertiary education. And it was quite an interesting dichotomy, because I grew up and I was in the armed forces. I was a regimental instructor in the army, and one of the things that we basically were fighting against, what we call terrorism, or as other people termed it, freedom fighters, coming down from the north infiltrating into the country. So a lot of it was interesting, and then moving out of that space, which was highly disciplined, highly regulated, incredibly controlling, very disciplined, moving into a space in a university where suddenly I had an English lecturer who exposed me to black writing that I'd never heard about. I'd never heard of a lot of the writers in Africa because we weren't allowed to read their books. So it was pretty amazing, really, opening up a whole new world, really. And if I hadn't had a tertiary education, I wouldn't have been exposed to any of that. So from that perspective, it began to dawn on me that education was a really, really important thing and an important cog. And probably my sport, and the sport I played, because I played both rugby and cricket at provincial level, was probably second to some of that stuff that was going on. And it also probably engendered in me a real drive to want to help people and want to grow people and, help them be better human beings, as it were, I think.
That's interesting, and probably connects a couple of dots for me, where one of the things I've admired about you for a long time is there seems to be a real dedication to looking for new education opportunities and new challenges, and almost trying to take yourself out of your comfort zone and make sure that you're constantly growing. And that's, I guess, something that I'm sort of trying to do more and more, and you would be someone that I look to in that space as a bit of inspiration, and it's kind of interesting to, I guess, learn a little bit more about the motivations behind some of those things.
I think there's that old saying, the fish rots from the head. If you don't keep the head fresh, you're in a bit of trouble. So it's real, right through our family life, one of the things Joan and I prided ourselves on, that Joan's my partner, prided ourselves on, was the fact that education was a really important part of the growth of our kids. And luckily enough, both of them have gone on to achieve extraordinarily well. But that's also in terms of growing as a cricketer, growing as a coach, growing as a human being. I think it's really important that you keep trying stuff and keep trying to move yourself forward. I always remember having a conversation with Glenn Pocknell. Glenn, as a young person, came along he was a printer, and he was getting very frustrated with the printing trade. I taught Glenn at Wellington College, and he came and saw me when I started working at Cricket Wellington in the coach development space, and said, "Look, I want to do some coaching." And I said, "Yeah, cool, come along to a course, come and do your thing." And Glenn sort of took to it like a duck to water, absolutely loved it. And I remember years later him coming to me saying, there's no pathway. Where's the coaching pathway? And my retort to him was, Glenn, there's no pathway. You make your own pathway. And that's a really important thing, I think, for coaches in this country to remember. Unless you've played to a really high level, you're going to have to make your own pathway. And it's really important that coaches understand that and invest in themselves, invest in their learning, and invest in how to be better. So from my perspective, kind of my teaching background has helped me fulfill this dream. And I must admit, I'm really lucky to be in the NZC coach development space, where I sometimes wake up in the morning and think, am I really going to work? This isn't work. It's just, I just love doing what I do. So from my perspective, that's a fantastic place to be in.
For those, I guess, that don't immediately know what coach development is, what would your kind of brief description of your role?
It's really, so I guess coach development is helping coaches understand where they're at, what they could do more of to be better, to grow their knowledge around coaching. More often, it's often about self-awareness. It's to help them understand who they are. Because I think when you go into coaching, there's very little direction. You go into it because you love the game. You might love the culture in the game. You might love aspects of the game that are really, really important to you. But you remain pretty unself-aware. And I think for me as a coach developer, it's about growing that self-awareness and helping coaches understand a little bit more about who they are, what makes them tick, how they can get the best out of themselves, what they can do to improve, but also not to probably take themselves too seriously. After all, it is a game. So I think, if that's a summary, it's probably educating, but also supporting, mentoring, questioning, being that critical friend, and just encouraging people to be the best they can be.
Not like that. I think that's a pretty good summation. So one of the things I found interesting, because I was fortunate enough to a couple of years ago now be on one of the residential courses with the coach development, was the theory of the push and the pull, and that we're trying to pull information out of people more than we're trying to push it on them. How do you find striking that balance?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the key things is you've got to be able to ask good questions. So the ability to, often what we tend to do is we tend to throw ourselves into question, because question is the way we coach. So we ask question after question after question. And the player eventually comes, they can ask me another. It's just about having a conversation and trying to get the best out of that player. So one of the things about coach development is who should be doing most of the talking. Well, if it's the coach I'm working with, then the coach should be doing most of the talking. How can I get that coach to do the most talking? Probably ask them loads of questions about themselves, because we love to talk about ourselves. So if we can get them starting to think a little bit more around self-actualization, who am I in this piece, understanding myself, understanding other people, understanding the nuances of the game. Good coaching is all about that. Know your sport, things like understanding learning and knowing what good performance looks like. Then I think there's, you can start to really, there's kind of 6 domains, if you like, and if you start to question in those 6 domains, then I think you're gonna find things that everybody can work on. So it's about making sure that we pull the information from the coach and we see if we can help them identify where their strengths are, because often people ignore. They're very good at looking at their weaknesses, but not so much at identifying their strengths. And I think there's no harm. It's fine to have weaknesses, but don't forget your strengths, because often your strengths are the things that are that you can cultivate and make them stronger and even better. Too often we focus on weaknesses and the things we don't do well, and frustrate ourselves intensely with that, and probably bring ourselves down. And so I like to, I always remember a really, really cool saying that somebody, I can't remember, it might have been John Reed, talked about coaches coach positives. So it's the same with coach developers. Coach developers help coaches develop positive behaviors. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's cool. It almost, strikes me is that we want to be careful of developing players and coaches that are a mile wide and an inch deep, in the sense that, actually lean into your strengths and lean into Have you noticed, because obviously you've worked with a range of coaches in the coach development space, from right at the grassroots up to some of the more kind of high performance ones, what are some of the traits that you've noticed with the more successful coaches?
Inquisitiveness, and also the ability to form strong relationships. So the ability to develop good, strong relationships is a vital key to coaching. The important thing is that you've got 12 individuals if you're working with 12, sometimes 14, sometimes 6, sometimes 18 individuals who you might be working with. And all of those people are different. And the key thing is successful coaches are able to have a really strong EQ, an understanding of how far to go with things. They'll understand who needs a pat in the back, who needs a gentle sort of conversation, who needs a G up, who needs to be told, who needs to be encouraged, etc. So there's a whole raft of things that go on in that space that is really difficult to manage and really intensely draining and tiring. So the successful coaches, I think, are those who are able to manage relationships well and are able to also, I guess it's a bit like being a parent. You need people, some people need to understand where the boundaries are. Some people need to be given a bit of freedom, but it's also making sure that you stick to your values and who you are as a person. And that's why that whole process of self-understanding, knowing who you are, which doesn't come easily to younger coaches. Sometimes they try to be things that they're not, it's a real important thing, a trait, I think, to stick to who you are. Be yourself. Try not to be somebody else.
It's interesting timing with that, because I know from a team coaching perspective, I'm sort of in my first sort of full-time role. Well, not full-time, but first like full-on role in that space that isn't just a tournament for a couple of weeks here or there. And it's something that I'm constantly kind of analysing and assessing and sort of looking, well, I really admire that coach and they go about it like this, and that's very different than how I go about it. And like, do I need a change, or do I fortunately I've got some good people around me, like to include yourself in that, that I feel like I'm kind of, sort of sitting on a balance of looking for areas to improve, but sort of sticking to my guns, so to speak. But there's definitely been points where it's like, I wonder if I need to be a little bit tougher than I am and a little bit less laid back. And, I tend to look at a lot of like South African coaches and players, that kind of hard-nosed, like tough cricketer. That's what I wanted to be like when I was playing. I love the idea of being an opening batsman, that I wasn't doing my job unless I was taking a couple in the ribs or something like that. But it's probably not in my nature to deal with people like that. So that's been kind of an interesting time.
It's an interesting journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I think it's really important you be who you are. You've got to be authentic to yourself, really. And if you're trying to be something you're not, people figure that out pretty quickly. And that's when you get into trouble. I think a real important thing is being yourself. Stick to those strengths, stick to who you are. And if it's not in your nature to be that way, don't try. Be your own best. Be kind to yourself. That's important. Cricket coaching is a hell of a lonely job, and you need to remember that, because ultimately, you're in charge of a team. So it's a pretty lonely existence being a coach. And I think an important part of what you do is going to be around ensuring that, you're true to yourself, true to your values, true to who you are, and authentic. Because the minute you pretend, oh boy, it's like teaching. If you pretend to be something, kids figure it out real quick. For me, that's a really powerful part of my learning journey, if you like. The other thing is sometimes there can be quite a lot of ego involved with coaching. And I think as a coach, you're a servant to your players. You are not, not the sage on the stage. You're more the guide on the side.
I like that. That's a good one. I've listened to quite a bit of Paddy Upton talk about that, and he's very big on that. If you're writing the results too much, it's egos creeping in, and it's not about you. It's about the players out in the middle, and just finding ways to serve them. And I think like that's something that makes sense to me. And so I think that's yeah. In terms of sort of the relationships and some of those things you talked about with the more successful coaches you've seen, obviously there's a challenge for coaches in the more amateur or semi-professional space where they're not necessarily seeing players every day. Like with a college first 11 or a club side, you might see them 4 hours a week outside of game days. How would you go about navigating that? And you have navigated that quite successfully. Like you're at a very successful Hibs side. You've had good success with club sides as well. What would your advice be for, I guess, working on that stuff while you're also trying to run trainings and making sure players are kind of getting their skill and kind of physical requirements met? How would you go about kind of building those relationships on the side?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's one that all coaches in that sort of amateur space struggle with, and that's really, for me, that was my learning ground. I was lucky in the sense that I worked as a teacher in the school. So what I could do is I could invest in understanding where each of those students in my team was in terms of academics, what their family life was like, what they were like as people, what they were like. I could watch. I think you've got to be a good observer. It's a really good thing to look around the room and watch how they interact with their teammates to begin to understand a little bit more about them. So in that sense, I think it's important that you immerse yourself in understanding who your players are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, knowing where their birthday is, maybe catch up. So one of the things that used to happen with me is I used to get invited to functions, and I always felt a little uncomfortable about drinking alcohol together with the parents. I always love a beer, don't get me wrong, I love a beer, but it was a real important thing, and I discovered it at Wellington College, where I was a fearsome smoker, and all of a sudden found that a lot of the guys on my team was smoking as well. So there's that role modelling thing. So I think you've got to be really mindful of that as somebody who's interested in those players. But yeah, it's just about finding out about them. And today with technology, just staying in contact with them. You got the WhatsApp groups. Your team could be on a WhatsApp. You could be texting them. You could just be a bit mindful of that, obviously, and it can't be a too personal sort of thing. But I think it's about understanding who they are. So at a training session, when I was running at Wellington College, I had a whole bunch of guys there who weren't particularly academic, great sportsmen. So Dwayne Bowden, I used to take the mickey out of him and tease him about his results, and he would always laugh, etc. And we had that good relationship. So it's just about finding out about them and who they are and what kind of makes them laugh, makes them smile, makes them want to come back next Thursday to training, makes them want to come back on Saturday morning for the game. To be it's bigger than just cricket. It's the relationship piece. So I think we've got to remember that, and team culture. I think it's so important that any coach has got to every year revisit or develop your team culture. So at a school like Hibs, it was really easy because they had the DNA. They had the Hibs DNA, which is a really cool set of things. It was about honour, integrity, belief, and the last one was around service. So it was those four things that we looked at, Honour was all about, how we treat others, how we respect others. So there's your management of your team, When we're on the field, we compete, but we don't slag people off, and we don't, call people names and swear at people. It's just not the way we are. We respect them for who they are. We respect their opponents. But also we play hard. The whole idea is around integrity. We'll follow through on our commitments. We do what we say we're going to do. It's these sorts of things that you can actually measure. It's those behaviours you can look at and you can measure and you can assess after your game or at the end of the week or at the end of training, whenever you choose to do that. So that was powerful for me, as always about developing a team culture, to continue and then trying to understand those values. So I think as a coach and as a learner coach, you can do that. And often it's there for you. It's either in the motto of your representative team. It's in the behaviours schools expect. It might be in the school charter. It could be wherever it is. Find what those are, but also talk to your students about them. But I think that personal connect is really important. So understand who they are real important. Where do they live? What's their family connection? What are they like at school? When's their birthday? Those are easy things to find out. Keep a note of those things. And if it's their birthday, hey, happy birthday. That's good. Congratulations. Good to 17, hey, woo, etc., etc. So just keeping it light, keeping it something. But also at times, you've got to give some hard messages. And I think that's, don't shirk away from that. I think it is important that it's also how you get those hard messages across. It's not necessarily about you telling, it's about them telling you. So I think there's lots of power in that when people, in terms of learning, where people develop that awareness.
So from that side of things then though, in terms of like on the hard messages, I imagine with any team coaching over an extended period of time, you're going to have some different challenges, whether it's personality clashes or, even one we had at the start of this year is we just had so many all-rounders that there were guys batting up the order that didn't get to touch the ball all season and guys batting down the order that didn't get much of an opportunity, and having to have that conversation with them, what were some of the, I guess, obviously not shirking away from it, you mentioned that. What were some of the crucial things you kept in mind when having those conversations?
I think it's really important that, I always remember Dad saying to me, there's this thing called eating the green frog. So the idea that there's a green frog that's been put on a plate in front of you, it's a small, tiny little thing like that, and if you keep leaving it, it's going to get bigger and bigger. So what ends up happening is you've got 7 meals to eat by the end of the week rather than just that one little tiny bitter thing that you've got to swallow. So it's get the thing done. And I guess how you go about that is you have a clear idea in your head about where you want this conversation to go. So you've got to plan it. It's not just like it just happens. You've got to plan it. It's really important that you have a little plan in your head about how you would like this conversation to go. And then you also allow them to say, and you might say, look, what do you think of our team? You might come up, you talk about you've got so many all-rounders. And see if you can get that message from them. And then you get them to admit, well, we've got a whole team of all-rounders. Okay, so what do you think we're going to do about that? And you might get them to come up with some solutions. And then you say, well, here's what I'm thinking. And you deliver the message. Then you stay safe, you sit back, and you let them absorb that message, because it's never easy. It's like dropping players, any of those tough conversations. It's a tough conversation. And it's not, and I think it's also saying it at the outset, look, this is not easy for me to do. I'm telling you, I'm going to give you some information here that both of us aren't going to enjoy, aren't going to like. But it has to be delivered, and I'm really interested and care for you. And the other thing about it is that at the end of that message, you have to offer them a way out. You have to offer them a solution. You have to offer them something that says, hey, I still care. I think you can go here or you can do that. And then the choice is theirs. If they go, that's rubbish, that's their call. You've offered them the opportunity, etc. They can either take it up or they can leave it. So I think it's never easy. It's never easy. Tough conversations is part of the coaching role. And it's what we have to do sometimes. If you're a parent, you're going to do it with your kids. If you're a teacher, you do it with underperforming students. If you're a boss, you'd have to do it with workers. It is not an easy place to be, but we have to do it a lot. If you choose to lead, you've got to lead. As a coach, you're the bus driver, you've got to drive the bus. If your passengers aren't behaving, you kick them off. Or you have a conversation and see if you can modify their behaviour. It's no different. So I think there's a really important message there for leaders.
I guess another place I wanted to dig in on your expertise was I'm often thinking about from the parent's perspective. Often like if you're coaching a player one-on-one, parents will be asking for advice or information with a team, like how they can support better. What would your kind of couple of key bits of advice be from a parent's side of things? What can they do to help little Jimmy or little Sarah?
Yeah, that's a great question. Parents, we've got to deal with parents. We need to embrace them. That's the first thing. Get alongside them, because parents only want the best for their kids. and it's our job to ensure that we try and provide the best for them as is best possible. I think if I was to advise parents, is get out of your kids' way, because more often than not, what we tend to do, or what parents tend to do, is because we want the best, we invest a lot of energy, effort, emotion into their well-being and what they're feeling and how they're feeling about things. And sometimes, earlier when talking about difficult conversations, sometimes when you give a message where things are not going so well, there's perhaps a lack of resilience, and it's really important that kids learn and understand that it's okay to fail, and that at times in life you're going to fail. It could be your marriage, it could be your next innings with a cricket bat, it could be your business, it could be your relationships. And those are big things. Those are big deals. And if we learn in a small environment like a cricket team to fail and how to fail really well, there's a good chance we're going to develop some resilience around players in our team to fail perhaps on a bigger scale later on in life, and learn that the world doesn't end with failure. So I think it's really important. Cricket is a game of failure. We fail a hell of a lot playing this game, whether you're bowling and you're trying to hit a length and you get smacked back over your head for 6 and your over goes for 14 when you were trying to get it to go for 4. Or you get a duck, you get a nickel first delivery. We fail a lot in this game. It's the nature of the game. And we need to learn how to fail better. And I think a really important part of what we do as parents is we protect our kids. And I would like to see parents just get out of their way. Be supportive, get alongside them, help them, offer them as many opportunities for them to succeed as you can. And allow them to fail, allow them to do well, celebrate when they do well, allow them to fail, but also continue to be their parent. I think it's a really, really important, and not their coach. And at times parents are coaches, but it's also about how do you understand the difference between that role. Don't be the coach at the dinner table, be the parent at the dinner table. On the cricket field or the rugby field or the football field, be the coach. But I think it's about getting out of their way, helping them to achieve the best they can be, throwing balls to them, letting them bowl, giving them some tasks to do, supporting them at team trainings, managing the team, helpfully coaching the team, acting as an assistant coach, just being there for them. I think that's a real important thing for parents to understand.
I think that's a great kind of checklist for any parent to take on board. It's interesting the points around resilience as well, because I think most people would, and there's probably sort of biases and that sort of thing, but most people would acknowledge that perhaps generations coming through are getting less resilient, but we also seem to be taking away opportunities to show resilience, and it's kind of this sort of dangerous cycle, whereas as it gets less resilient, you take away more and more opportunities to show that resilience, which I guess it's a tough thing as a parent of a young child, kind of, like you say, you want the best for them and that sort of thing, but sometimes it's actually letting them stand.
They've got to be allowed to fail.
Yeah, stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah.
I
I always it always amuses me when I see mums and dads carrying cricket bags to cricket training or cricket matches, and little Johnny or whoever Mary is not carrying the cricket bag themselves. It drives me to despair. It's that sort of thing that I see. I used to see a lot of that. It's going and consoling them when they haven't made runs, etc. It's just leave them alone. Leave them be. Let them understand what it's like. Let them understand how to fail. Make sure that afterwards you're talking about the hamburger and whatever we're doing Saturday night. You're not talking about how unfair the umpire decisions were. You're not talking about how poor they dropped your catch, etc., etc. It just undermines the team. It undermines the coach. It undermines everything. And what happens is the child begins to think less of everybody. There's enough of that going on in this modern day society. We don't need to have that happening that all the time in our teams. So I think it's about really trying to create a positive environment for kids to grow up in and kids to thrive in. And thriving, being able to thrive, you need to know how to fail in order to thrive. It's not all going to be roses, chocolates the whole way through.
No, that's, again, another more very good points. So from back to sort of a coaching point of view, you've coached a number of players that have gone on to be quite successful in teams that you've been a part of. I think you coached James Franklin at Wellington College, I'm sure amongst a number of other talented players. Sophie Devine was part of the Blaze when you were involved there. You had that team at Hibs. You had a number of players at Hibs, but specifically that team that had sort of Rachin and Ravindra, Ben Sears and Troy Johnson all on the same side. What really stuck out to you with those players? That there's probably different things, but with those players from a young age that you could see that, like, did you know all of those players were going to be something special?
I think you get an inkling. You certainly get an inkling. Just the way they conduct themselves. Like James was supreme belief in himself. James was really interesting because he went away on summer holidays, a little fella, and he arrived back after the summer holidays, a 6'4" giant. And I threw him the ball, said, "You're going to bowl fast." And that's how we worked on him. We just got him to try and bowl fast. And that was wonderful because he just turned into this beautiful, beautiful bowler with beautiful rhythm and pace. I wish I could have taught him to land on his front foot. So there's an example of a guy who, possibly didn't necessarily, could have worked harder to try and get him to land on his front foot to deliver the ball with more pace. But he had supreme belief in himself. Also, a young guy had suffered some hardship in his life. He lost his sister when he was a teenager to a very terrible motor accident at Christmas time. So he suffered some challenges, James. Growing up. Guys like Rachin's just work ethic. Just worked and worked and worked. Worked so hard. Did loads of video analysis. Looked at other players. Benny Sears just wanted to bowl fast all the time. Just loved bowling fast. Loved hurting people. Loved wanting to kill the batsman at the other side of the ground. Smart guy. Bright, intelligent guy. Understood how the world worked. Understood his own game. Always frustrated himself with his own game. Was always very frustrated. So one of the things with him was to try and not get him to be so hard on himself. To try and relax. I had Mayu Pasupati as a cricketer at Wellington College. He's such a skillful cricketer, a brilliant cricketer. Just again, family support, great family, supported him through thick and thin, helped him through. Bright kid too, worked hard academically, had loads of really strong family support. Rachin had a dad and mum and the whole family supported him. Ben's dad played cricket for Wellington, so there were things that were working in favour. We had, but there's nothing beats hard work. Or if there's one thing that I would say for all those cricketers and all those cricketers that I've worked at that have been successful, it's that willingness and that ability to do the work and do it very quietly on their own, working with another player, throwdowns at the net. Jimmy used to go down to collegians trainings and bowl to all the senior players. He lived around the corner from the house, so he'd walk down to cricket training at collegians and run in and bowl to all the senior players and sometimes get a bat. But all those sorts of things, just that informal nature of training and practice and playing in the back garden, playing with mum and dad and, mum and dad being supportive and helping. I think that's what's taken those players to the next level.
You don't have to name names here, but is there anyone on the other side of that coin that's maybe you thought that could have? Yeah. What do you think's been? And I'm sure it's a multitude of factors.
Growing up, being exposed to alcohol, going to their first party, meeting a girl, all of life gets in the way, and that becomes more attractive because it doesn't involve the same sort of discipline. And if you can do both things, fantastic, that's brilliant. But I've seen innumerable players who were more talented than those people that I've spoken about, perhaps, who could have gone on to do great things and succumbed to to things, to other stuff, like the pleasures of life, if you like, other things, alcohol, be it alcohol, parties, hanging around with mates, other sports, rugby. I know a couple of guys who went on to play rugby. Jed Robinson, wonderful left-arm spin bowler, ended up playing Super 12 rugby. Played for Wellington, played for the Hurricanes. Great guy, wonderful cricketer. There's a young man, Dwayne Bowden, who lives in Australia now. It's an immense talent. Should have played for Wellington. He was an immense talent. James Hill, very, very talented off-spinner, left-hand bat, who got opportunities but was stymied by the system at that stage, where they pushed the boat out with was very sort of forthcoming in training sessions. A typical young guy wanted to advance his cause, but it didn't fit with the group that he was with at that stage. Simon Allen was head boy of Wellington College. He led the first 15 rugby team to a they won the top 7, I think it's called, or top 6, and they won a Gillette Cup. That was the year after I left Wellington College. Simon captained both those teams. He was head boy of the school. Just an absolute brilliant young man. Him and Steve Murdoch, who was a St Pat's boy, played together in the Wellington under-19 team. And I remember Simon getting a brilliant 100 against Auckland. Steve Murdoch, who I was lucky enough to coach as an under-17, I remember taking a team to Australia, and he got a brilliant 100 against the Queensland men's team. In fact, we nearly knocked them over. As a Wellington under-23 team, we nearly knocked the Queensland team over. So Joey Daw was bowling, Ashley Nofke was bowling, all those, Ashley Nofke's coaching cricket here now, he's coaching Otago. So, so some really exciting guys who came through, but also some real talent that possibly missed just to life getting in the way.
That's pretty incredible. But it's a pretty common trend, I think. You see it kind of, sort of throughout.
It's a choice, Taylor. I think it's a choice. I think you make your choices, and that's okay. That's okay. And I don't think what I always worry about is the regret, because I think possibly in some cases you see your own life in that way too. I sort of, as I said, grew up during a period where we couldn't play international cricket with anybody. I would have given my eye teeth to play international cricket, but it was a bit of a dead end, so I couldn't take my game anywhere. I love my rugby, I love my cricket, I love playing multiple sports. I love my social hockey on a Sunday after rugby, and that entailed drinking a few beers afterwards with the boys and like that too. So that's sort of, but coaching and teaching probably has always been probably my first love, really.
Well, it definitely sounds like there were consistent themes for you all the way through in terms of taking up those opportunities to kind of help others develop and grow. What was the pathway for you from South Africa? Like, so you finished teaching college. Did you start teaching in South Africa?
Yeah, I did. I started teaching there. I went to a school called Bryanston High where I started teaching. Then I went back to my old alma mater, which was King Edward VII School, where I was an English teacher. I went to the UK where I met my partner Joan, and came back to South Africa. Started teaching again, but couldn't settle. Sort of engaged in this long-distance relationship in London and South Africa. Joan didn't want to really live in South Africa, and suggested I come over to New Zealand for a bit of a holiday, which I did, and made the decision to stay and live in New Zealand on the shores of Lake Taupo. I remember very clearly, we were lucky. We had a beautiful house just on the edge of the lake, and we were very lucky. And I just thought, this is like God's country, this place, and it was. If you're willing to work hard in this country and you're willing to put yourself out there, the sky's the limit. You can go anywhere you want to, but you've got to work hard. You've got to earn New Zealanders' trust. One of the things I always talk to South Africans about it, you say, "Oh, it's hard. It's hard." I say, "Yeah, it's hard. You've got to earn their trust. They don't just trust you. They're nice, they're great, but they'll keep you at arm's length until they trust you." So it's a really important part of growing up in this, or being an immigrant to New Zealand. Packed up 4 cardboard boxes and left Johannesburg Airport and arrived at a little double-bedroomed house in Kilburnie, where we wintered over. It was the coldest winter I think I've ever had in my life. So we had a little flat in Kilburnie to start off with, a little 2-bedroom flat. Joan was nursing at that stage, and I couldn't find a job. It was really hard to find a job. So, and then I ended up starting teaching at St Mark's, like a relief teaching position at St Mark's. And then, interestingly enough, I got the job at Wellington College purely by chance. I went around the back of the nets when I heard cricket practice going on. I thought, I'm going to have a look. And I went around the back of the nets and I was chatting away to the then coach, who said, I'm heading overseas at the end of this term. Are you interested in coaching this team? Because I talked to him about cricket and where I was from. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. Guy by the name of, I think it was Tony Morris. I remember his surname was Morris. He was at that stage, he was the economics teacher. And he said, I'll tell Dave Ashby. Dave Ashby was the DP at Wellington College. Next thing I got a phone call saying, come in for a chat about coaching the first 11 cricket team. So I went up and had it. From there on, I was the first 11 coach. I took them to the Gillette Cup that year. And I had some interesting characters in that team, that was for sure. I remember them on the break night. They all came back to town they drove from Palmerston North back to Wellington for a dance. So you can imagine the condition a lot of them arrived in the next day. The worst thing about it was he had a really good opportunity to win that. And unfortunately, that didn't go so good the next day after that. But at that point, I decided things needed to change if I was going to be involved. And then I coached cricket at the school, and I got involved in the Hillary Commission. The Hillary Commission funded my position as a sports coordinator at Wellington College. And that funding ran out after 2 years, I think. And after that, I was like a bit of a fixture at the school. So I was coaching athletics, I was coaching high jump, I was coaching the under-15 open rugby team, and looking after the first 11 as well as the whole cricket program. And I think at one stage we were the second biggest club in New Zealand. I think we had 22 or 23 cricket teams at Wellington College. I always remember having to run around and collect our cricket balls after the Saturday matches, which was a bit of a challenge. No, it was great. It was great fun, though. Yeah, it was brilliant. Taught me a lot. Taught me a hang of a lot.
Yeah. Wow, that's very, very cool. How long were you at Wellington College for?
I was there for 6 years, I think. Yeah.
And then was it up to Hibs after that? Was there something?
No. I got the role at Cricket Wellington then. Yeah. And then unfortunately I was made redundant at Cricket Wellington, and I had been coaching up at Hibs because my son attended. We were lucky enough to be able to allow my son to attend school there. Well, he was the one who got in. He was interviewed and got the opportunity to join the school if he wanted to, and he chose to do that. And we just had to pay the school fees. So we were lucky to be able to do that for him. And they asked me if I'd help out with the junior team. So I coached his little under-13 cricket team. And at that stage, Troy Johnson was playing up from the junior school, because the intermediate school and the college are attached. And Troy was playing up into the college team at that stage. And his dad was the DP at the school. He was involved with me as the manager and said, you've got to coach the first 11. I was initially a wee bit reluctant, because I think you can have more impact as a quality coach with year 9s than sometimes you can with the first 11. But I took the role on. It was a paid role, which was lovely. It was a nice extra bit of income, a bit of a side gig, which I needed. Working in sports administration can be a bit of a challenge financially, with a partner who's a nurse. So it was really helpful. And I got to coach future Wellington players, which was brilliant. And Cricket Wellington weren't even paying me. So it was quite good fun. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it.
What would be again? We've sort of gone through your kind of cricketing background and journey so far, and it's pretty broad, and there's a lot of different sort of pockets there. What would be like a couple of your favourite memories that sort of stick out to you? I'm sure there's plenty.
Yeah, there's loads. Yeah, probably one of the ones that just came up as you were saying that was being with the Wellington Blaze, where we lost the one-day final at the Basin the day before. In the last over of the game, it might have even been the second to last ball. We lost the final of the one-day competition. The next day, we stood up and we won the 2020 against the same Canterbury side that had beaten us the day before, which was just fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. In terms of international stuff, was visiting Lords with the White Ferns, travelling the West Indies, which I would never in my life have gone to the West Indies. So I'm forever thankful to Gary Stead for ringing me up. I always remember I was in the New World car park out in Upper Hutt, and the phone rang, and I thought, oh, I picked up the phone, and I was sitting in the car. I was just going to get some lunch, and Gary Stead said to me, "Do you want to come to the West Indies with the White Ferns?" And I said, "This is a prank call, isn't it? Someone's pranking me." He said, "No, Borthwick, it's me, it's Steady. You want to come to the..." And I said, "Do I want to?" I said, "Absolutely, I want to." And I got the opportunity to travel to the West Indies with him, which was just amazing. I learned so much on that trip, so much about coaching international cricket, and about how the do's and don'ts, and just some of and working with the girls. It was a whole new world for me, a whole new world.
What was the difference between international and domestic?
Probably the conversations you have, and even at domestic level, coaching at domestic level, it's a similar sort of thing. It's about those conversations. It's about driving performance, really. How can we get the best out of you in terms of performance, and I think talking strategy, and how we're going to go about things, and how we plan things, and how we want to plan an innings, and we know things are going to go wrong, and that's okay. It's how we adapt, and if that happens, how can we adapt? Oh, we'll do this, or we'll do that next thing. So it's a bit like a game of chess. It was just about moving those pieces around, and how we're going to approach this. We know that so-and-so does this. So one of the cool things was, I remember playing the West Indies, Deandra Dotton. I figured out she's not great player of the bouncer. And Nick, we got Nick Brown to bowl her a bumper, and got her out cheap. So it was we'd planned it, So when it came off, it was great. It oh, that's cool, that happened. So it's those sorts of things that you sort of pick up and you assimilate, and it's just about the conversations about performance and trying to get the best out of them, out of those girls, which I think we did. We got to 2 finals in both those World Cups, in the UK and in the West Indies. Just couldn't put the nail in the coffin, and I think when we were in the West Indies, we should have, because I think we bowled them out for just over 100, and we just couldn't get it. Couldn't get there. It was very frustrating, but yep, you live and learn,
Would be remiss not to discuss the recent result in the Women's World Cup.
Yeah, very excited for those girls. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So many of those girls, well, a couple of them, Sophie, who else was in that team? Susie Bates, yep, she was in that team, young. Leah was sort of in and out, but her partner was in there, Amy. It was a great team. Lucy Doolan. We had a lot of Wellington girls in that team. Sian Ruck, beautiful in-swing bowler. Really, really good cricketer. Lucy Doolan was an exceptional cricketer. Superb cricketer. Wonderful. Her and Susie Bates together was so tough to bowl to, because Susie was tall and Dooley was a little tiny thing, and Dooley would sort of hit the ball off the back of the bat and do all sorts of sneaky little things. She's an incredible cricketer, and a real live wire as well. Just a lovely person. But I guess also highlights probably the Gillette Cup with our team. It was very special. We knew we could get close, and we did. But then the following year, we had, a couple of years later, I coached a team that had no stars, and we ended up being at the bottom of the grade, and we ended up fighting for promotion. And I always remember playing Hutt Valley High, and we won the game, and we were promoted back into the Premier Grade the following year. So that was true tekka and guts and determination and sticking to tasks. So I was very proud of that team, really proud of that team.
Yeah, I think in terms of you think some of the life lessons you can take away from the game, and I do think cricket's a great game to teach life. Picking yourself up from the mat like that is, that's definitely something that you can kind of carry through for.
I think that's why I love the game, because it mirrors life so much. You fail, you pay, you do things really well. You have really high, you have highs, you have real lows. Success, failure, mateship, enemies, Yeah, challenges. It's a fantastic game that mirrors life, I think, and that's why I think knowing people and knowing yourself are really, really important as a coach. So being able to understand that you need to be there needs to be consistency all the way through that, around your behaviour, how you approach players, how players approach you. So coaching is a real challenge, I think. But it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's definitely it's a worthy pursuit in terms of something that I've sort of been looking at a lot is there's been, I guess, a few seeds perhaps planted in players a few years back that I haven't had an awful lot to do with in recent times, but just kind of starting to bear a little bit of fruit now. So it's and sort of a few acknowledgements around that. So it's such a cool way to kind of go through life where you know able to help these young people, and not so young people, but help these young people and kind of be a part of that journey and help grow them.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a real honour in that. I ran yesterday I ran a session with a bunch of collegians guys who are they're not a premier team or anything like that, but they're a bunch of guys who are interested in playing cricket, want to be better at what they do. And I got such a lovely message this morning to say thanks so much for coming around. The guys really, really enjoyed what you did, and we'd love to have you back again at some point if you can spare the time. So just that sort of stuff is really fulfilling, and sort of makes it all worthwhile. Really,
absolutely. We're almost out of time, so just wanted to thank you again for giving up your Friday afternoon and coming in to sit down for a chat. And really appreciate I guess your time today, but again everything that you've kind of done to help me through the last decade or so I've known, probably longer than that actually. And to be honest, all that you do for the cricketing community as well, because I know it's it's a lot. Absolutely.
Really. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Borthwick. Cool.